Hello, Gustavo. Okay, let me go ahead and stop the music and we will get started. So first of all, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for taking some time on a busy Friday. I'm sure that everyone has a lot that they're working on, but I'm so grateful that you would come and spend some time with myself and with these four amazing guests that graciously agreed to come and hang out and share their heart, because that's really what they are going to do. And I'm so blessed that I have an opportunity to ask them some questions. So they're going to introduce themselves, but I did want to just say their names out loud in my best telenovela voice, because they deserve that, ¿verdad? My name is Jose Medina. My full name is Jose Luis Medina Hernandez Franco Lopez Junior Diaz Cruz. I am definitely queer. I am definitely brown, and I am definitely a Spanglish speaker. And I will be asking questions today of Joe Dombrowski. Some of you may know him as Mr. D times 3. We have David Nungaray, who is an amazing administrator, Laura Rizzo, who has served students in various capacities, but as a counselor as well, and Jerry Romero, who is a middle school teacher that is just causing desmadre all over the place with the fabulous work that he is leading there. So we are going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that you could see our guests in a bigger space. I've pinned them so that you're able to see their entire faces and their entire hearts. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and get started. So first of all, to the four of you, gracias. Thank you so much for doing this. I feel like it's something that's needed. And so I really appreciate your willingness to share your testimonio as well as your experience as queer educators in a world that often has not been welcoming to folks like us. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first question. And we'll start with Mr. Dombrowski, since you were the first one on the invite, on the flyer. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself. This might include your pronouns, but also where you're calling and logging on from, and how do you serve in the pre-K-12 setting? And then we'll continue from there with our other panelists. You're muted.
See, here's the thing. I taught kindergarten for last year, and when you teach kindergarten online, here's the thing. I think every day that I can tell them, unmute your mic, unmute your mic, but I can't even do it myself. So we can't ask kids to do what we cannot accept of ourselves. Am I right?
Amen.
Anyway. Hello, everybody. I'm Joe Dombrowski. My pronouns are he, him. If I'm up in the drags, you're more than welcome to call me she, her, but don't bro me till you know me, if you know what I'm saying. I am currently a kindergarten teacher here in Seattle, Washington. I've been a teacher for 11 years in the Detroit area and also the Chicago area. I've taught everything from kindergarten to 6th grade, with the exception of 1st and 2nd, because how can I teach kids to read when I can't read myself? And I'm excited to be here today. Dr. Jose Medina and I crossed paths about 4 years ago at a professional development in my school district. And I was like, here's the thing, you're me, I'm you. We need to be best friends. And I sort of trapped him in a professional relationship to where we are both friends and lovers in spirit. And I cannot wait to see you in DC in just a few months, sir.
I know.
So that's a little bit about me.
I'm super excited. Thank you for being here, Joe. David, let's go ahead and go to you. Who are you, David? ¿Quién eres?
Híjole, qué pregunta. Who are you? How much time do I have? I'm David Nungaray. I'm a school principal here in San Antonio, Texas, San Antonio ISD. This is my 3rd year as principal, going into my 4th. 12th year overall in education. I grew up in California. Both my parents son inmigrantes de Mexico, right across the border in Tijuana. I grew up in California and moved out here in 2010 with Teach for America. I'm actually the school principal at the same school that I was a teacher at, except you'll get to hear more about my story, but I left my school for a while and came back 3 years ago as principal. My pronouns are he, him, él. And yeah, I love getting to do the work that I do in the city of San Antonio, and I'm here proudly representing the city and the work that we do here.
Gracias, David. Gracias por estar con nosotros. What about Laura? Laura, who are you?
Hello, everybody. My name is Laura Rizzo. I am coming to you from El Paso, Texas. My pronouns, El Paso, Texas. My pronouns are she, her, ella. Thank you, Mr. Nungaray, for reminding me to include that Spanish in there. You'll be hearing a lot of Spanglish, actually. I do a lot of Spanglish when I talk, so I'm glad that we're allowed to do that here. My jefito and my jefita are both from Ciudad Juarez. I'm sure Dr. Medina can relate to that, Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua. And I have been in education for 15 years now. I'm a high school counselor. I was blessed enough to teach middle school for 8 years. I coached for 10 years. I've been a high school counselor for 5 years, but the 1 year that I did spend in elementary school, the question that I got asked the most was, are you a boy or are you a girl? And I loved it. I love it beyond belief. Don't get me wrong. I love elementary school, but always get that question. So I completely love it. I met Dr. Medina as well in a professional development. And just like Joe, I immediately connected as a part-time public speaker and speaker for youth, for parents, for teachers. I always talk about connections. So that immediate connection is really important to me. So I'm just super blessed beyond belief to just be here. I'm very honored. So I hope that you all learn a little bit from my story.
Gracias por estar con nosotros. I really appreciate it. Un abrazote to the 915 participant, our panelist from the 915. And then Jerry, thank you for being here as well. ¿Quién es usted, Jerry?
Of course. So my name is Jerry Romero. My pronouns are he, him. I currently teach in San Antonio, Texas, in SAISD also. And I am a middle school teacher. So I think in education, I've been working there maybe for like 8 years, but this will be going into my 7th year teaching at this particular middle school, which is Tafoya Middle School, which is in the heart of the west side of San Antonio, for anyone who's familiar with it. I am currently the Japanese and culture studies teacher there, and also the sponsor for our LGBTQ+ Alliance. And so I've just been doing a lot of work over the last 6 years to kind of bring about that awareness on our campus and at our district level, and just trying to spread different messages to students and how to include more inclusivity within our curriculum. And so I'm hoping to share a lot of these ideas and things that we've done over the last few years with you all. And of course, I am definitely open to answering any questions that you all have in regards to, how did this, come out? How was this possible? Did you have support? On and on and on. But yes, I am super excited to be here.
Thank you for being here, Jerry. And yes, please, if you have any questions, what I'm going to be doing as I ask questions of our panelists, I will also be looking at the chat so that I can make sure that I address whatever questions you may have as well. I didn't share, but this is my 26th year, so I think I'm the oldest in the group. Not oldest, seasoned, and so super excited that we have different levels in terms of being in education represented here, and at different levels of education, as well as elementary, middle school, and high school is what I meant. So here we go. Let's go ahead and start maybe with Laura. Let's start this time with Laura. Laura, why was it important for you to be here? Because definitely being a queer educator is a different experience. So why were you so excited to share today?
I almost forgot to unmute, sorry. I think for me, more than just being honored and blessed was the fact that sometimes we just have to be transparent. I think our transparency can lead to, long gone are the times where there's this fine line between I'm the educator, you're the student. But, you look at me and, if I stand up, you look at me and I don't need to tell anybody that I'm a queer educator. You see it right then and there. And I think just identifying with them, identifying with kids on a personal level, I don't need to stand in front of a group of kids and tell them that I'm a queer educator when I talk about the identity crisis that I faced when I was 16 years old and I was going through depression, manic depression, and suicidal thoughts. I think they know immediately. So really just to share my experiences as an educator and being transparent with your kids, because the more transparent you are, the more they'll open up. Long gone are the days where we need to give an office referral for a misbehavior. Well, there's a reason why they misbehave. There's a reason why they behave that way. So first we just need to ask, why. And then just, you know, if we can talk to the educators here and they take something from what we have to say today back to their communities and save even one life, we're already making a difference. So that's why it was very dear to my heart, because there are 15 and 16-year-old Laura Rizos out there that are lost, that don't have the self-love because they can't understand the feelings that they're going through and these changes of who am I in the world. So if we can share that all together and really make the difference, and the educators take it back to their communities, or parents take it back to their kids to really understand where they're coming from, that's really, you know, the purpose and why this was so important for me to be here today.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to go to David next. David, obviously, you know that I've been a gay principal as well, and that's not an easy task. So why did you want to be here and share your experience with these participants that have logged on?
Yeah, for me, I think bottom line is people need to know we're here. We're everywhere. And sometimes you can see us and sometimes you can't. I kind of have the opposite experience from Laura, where most people meet me and they have no idea until I start talking about Jonathan, and they're like, who's Jonathan? I'm like, that's my husband. And I now, 11 years into it, going into my 12th year, can speak openly and honestly and carry that con orgullo. I think people need to know we're here. People need to know that we can create safe spaces across everywhere. We've come a long way in terms of our rights, in terms of the work that we can do in schools, but we're still under attack. In Texas, I mean, Jerry and I could go on this forever, but now there's this special session that's being called, and what's at stake again? Our kids' rights. Si no estamos aquí nosotros, si no estamos presentes, then you're gonna hear us. You're gonna know we're here. You're gonna know we're present. And to me, the purpose of this session was so that you can be heard, but so that people can also learn from us, learn from our stories. You're right, being a gay principal isn't easy. And I think being a gay, Latino, bilingual, bicultural, biliterate person is also not an easy task, but it's a task that I feel, I have to lead with my heart in this work. And when people know that, we can get into all the stories that we've probably had along the ways, but estoy aquí, estoy presente, and it's an honor to be here, like Laura said.
Thank you. Joe, why was it important for you to be here? Obviously, you are a kinder teacher this past year, but you've had a lot of experience in education. Why?
Yeah, education, especially being a gay teacher, is so important to me because I firmly believe that a lot of people can't teach. And if you can't teach, we don't need you. But if you have a heart, I call it the teacher heart, we need you because we need strong, passionate, dedicated educators to make moves and move mountains for our students. However, there is a huge disconnect with what is acceptable in education, where there's this stigma where society wants teachers to be this cookie cutter individual. And typically it's this, I call it the Mary Poppins young white teacher that they want to see over and over and over again. Well, guess what? I'm not that. And when it comes down to gay teachers, there is this insane stigma against gay male teachers, specifically gay male teachers in elementary school, around pedophilia and around these just wrong narratives that are written. And if you have that teacher heart, regardless of who you are, no matter what your background is or what you do, if you can serve kids with so much passion and ability and you can change their lives, you need to be in the classroom regardless of what it is. So I'm here every single day in the classroom being myself and being openly myself, both online and in the classroom, so people can see that we as rainbow humans, we're not the enemy. We care about kids too, just like any other Mary Poppins teacher who you might assume is perfect. But guess what? You don't know what goes on behind closed doors with them too. So how about that?
Ha! Mira que sassy.
Always.
Yeah, I know. Jerry, anything you'd like to add in terms of you and why you're here? Obviously, it's scary at times to be an openly queer educator, but you chose to be here.
Yeah, I think, I think everybody kind of summed it up pretty well, but I think a big thing is it really comes down for me to visibility, right? For us being there, not only for students, but for the schools that we represent, the parents of our students, the communities that we work in. I think the biggest thing that I've seen over the years is just the connections that you make with students, right? By being, openly and unapologetically you. And so students connect with you. And I think what we often see is that we forget that, oh, okay, well, there's, a queer student here, there's a queer student here. So, okay, it's just such a small population, let's kind of ignore it. But then when you start to open up, you start realizing how many of them have, siblings who are LGBTQ+, right, who have parents that are same-sex couples. And so the community goes from this small little population that you once thought existed to being this larger part of our community. And I think another reason is because, like I said, I work in the heart of the west side of San Antonio. And I think the intersections of especially students of color and sexuality and gender expression are often ignored. And I think we focus so much on, okay, we have to look more into, Black and brown students and their the spaces that they're provided within schools and their interactions with the school individuals. But we often forget that there are other aspects of who they are. And especially with the way these communities have dealt with sexuality and gender expression over, histories, and we're talking about like colonial histories that have impacted them. I think it's super important that there are people, especially educators, that are willing to push the system, right? And not just stand idly by, but be willing to just kind of be there to fight back, to make your voice heard, even in spaces when it's not welcomed.
Thank you so much, Jerry. You actually brought us to the reason why I originally wanted to do this session, why I wanted to facilitate this session. There are so many people that are presently engaging in anti-bias and anti-racism work, especially after the murder of George Floyd. We saw a level of activism once again come to the surface, specifically in education. But it's so strange because often that work excludes LGBTQ+ youth, which doesn't make any sense to me. Like, you can't say that you're working towards becoming anti-biased and anti-racist, but you want to hold on to your homophobia and your transphobia. And unfortunately, in pre-K-12 settings, that is still not the norm. Like, we are so terrified. And so that brings us to the second question, and I'll open it up to the four panelists, whoever would like to answer first. But there are obviously educators, leaders, teachers here, parents here, some who may be very nervous about taking that next step in actually engaging in conversations with pre-K-12 students about LGBTQ+ communities. So what would you tell them? And also, what are some of the strategies or some of the things that you've used in order to actually create an inclusive environment for our queer youth? ¿Quién quiere comenzar? Échale, David. Échale ganas, get us started.
I can do that. So I would say that if somebody's out there and they're afraid, it is a step to take. Like you said, it's on trend right now to be doing anti-bias, anti-racist work. And I hope that it doesn't just become a trend. I hope that it stays with us for a long time, but that we understand the intersectionality of identities. Many people on this call, all of us, represent some sort of wholeness that has to come forward. And in order for you to be an educator that's an ally to the LGBTQ+ community, you have to take the first step. And to me, that first step can look like partnering with your counseling department. That's kind of, to me, one of the go-to ways to be able to do this work. When I did some work at my previous school, which was a 4th through 12th grade school, we started with the counseling department. We started with the Texas Equality Coalition. We started with our local Pride Center. So I would say you can look internally and find who your allies are. And usually your counselors, not always, but usually your counselors are at the forefront of being good partners and allies in that work. I didn't see a lot of people like me. There weren't a lot of gay educators. There weren't a lot of gay principals. And so I had to also find people in the community. When I found Dr. Jose Medina, that was incredible. I knew other, queer folks who were kind of closeted, or people kind of knew they were gay. I'm gay, I'm out there. And so people have also, I found that that's been a strategy. Just being who I am has opened the doors for people to also approach me and to partner on work. Specifically, I would also look for PFLAGs in your area. Sometimes families want to do that work. I'm fortunate enough at the school that I'm at now that families wanted to do that work. So we did some work with our PFLAG. We also did work with the Transgender Education Network of Texas. And basically, I found my best strategy was to find a little bit of a shield, right? A little bit of protection by partnering with the counseling department, by partnering with parents who would be vocal allies, and then taking the steps forward. We also did some training with PFLAG and the Transgender Network of Texas with our faculty. And that was in my first year as principal. And I thought, híjole, if I'm not walking the walk, then ¿quién soy? And I had to take those steps. I wish there were more steps that I could take. Even something as simple as putting up Happy Pride on our marquee made a huge difference. I can, just such a simple thing like that can make such a difference. The social media that we're putting out there. But I would say if you're somebody that's looking to be a stronger ally, find somebody who's an advocate, find somebody who's willing to walk the walk with you. And that makes the world of a difference.
Awesome. Let's go to Jerry. Oh, do you want to go next, Laura? Yeah, we can go to Laura, then Jerry, and then we'll hit Joe.
I wanted to piggyback off of what David said, because our counseling department here in El Paso ISD, we actually have they distributed to us lanyards that have the words EPISD ally with a rainbow on them, and that's to show any teenager, any youth, PK through 12 that we were allies. So counselors wear them, some teachers wear them. So that's really, really beautiful to see. And, just talking about the openness, just being open. If you're not one of us that's a gay educator, you have a safe space for all. Just by simply one of my friends, I actually put out on social media, I put out a 1-minute video on what is it that you're doing in your classrooms to create that safe space. And some of my friends commented that they have the pride flag posted in their classroom, and they have that safe space, the safe space conversations in their classrooms. But I basically, I have 3 transgender students in my alpha as a high school counselor. So I have that open space where they can come into my office and talk about anything and everything that they'd like. The suicide rate and depression rate rose critically during the pandemic because the LGBTQ plus do not feel safe on campus or through a camera. So what is it that we can do? We can just listen to them. Just listen to them. If you're educators out there listening, and you have, a bell ringer or a quick write at the beginning of class, give them that open space to just talk about anything in their life, anything at all. Transparency can go a long way. And so, first 5 minutes of class, last 5 minutes of class, give them that open space to be able to talk about anything that they want, anything at all. And you'd be amazed with the types of, responses that you're going to get. And be open with them and talk to them. Yesterday, I had a conference with parents. It can relate to educators as well. And I'm sure that you all have seen it out there. I wish my students knew, there's a video out there. I wish my teacher knew. Why don't you start with, I wish my students knew that this is an open space for them to talk about anything that they want to talk about, and just be transparent enough. If you're targeting your LGBTs, tell them, I wish my LGBT students knew that I'm here for them no matter what, and I'm open to listening to anything that they want to say. So just some quick strategies, and putting it out there on social media as well, putting it out there on social media, especially now during Pride Month. And when I put out those statistics, I get amazing responses from educators on what they're doing to create that open space.
Thank you, Laura. Jerry, what would you like to add in terms of the things that you're presently doing to really make sure that the work is getting done?
Absolutely. So I think one of the biggest things that I've always, told people whenever I'm discussing these issues is that there's never going to be progress or action without taking a risk, right? It's always going to be there. And I always remind them of kind of like past movements, right? When we talk about, 50 years ago when, desegregation of schools, or when we talk about the push to allow students to speak Spanish, right, in schools, indigenous people to reclaim their languages, right? These were all movements that had some form of resistance against them. And same thing with this. I mean, and like David and I, we both live in a state that is actively pushing, right, anti-LGBTQ policies constantly. And so it is something you have to constantly push against. So for me, 6 years ago, when I started as a first-year teacher at Tafoya Middle School, I remember speaking with some students who kind of expressed to me the experiences that they were going through. And what caught me off guard, I think what I was used to, of course, is because things that I experienced as a student myself were, issues of bullying, issues of harassment, on and on and on. But when students started to tell me about, these same bullying and harassment issues that they were having with teachers, that is when it hit me that this is more of a systemic issue. And of course, and students are kind of pinned between this space where they may not be out at home, they may not be comfortable with parents, and so they don't know who to tell. And how do you confront an adult? How do you confront another teacher without administrators getting involved, without administrators wanting your parents involved, and then now you're out at home, on and on and on. So I think a lot of people take advantage of the fact that students especially queer students especially happen to be in very vulnerable positions and are not really able to fight back. So it was at that moment that I realized that I had to do something for these students. And I mean, believe me, I was definitely scared as a first-year teacher, because I thought I'm starting to rock the boat in a position where they can easily just say, you know what, we don't need you here anymore. And especially calling out other educators, right? I mean, that's a big deal. And so from there, we started what we called the Tafoya Alliance, and it was just open to LGBTQ students and allies, and it created a safe space on our campus. And then from there on, for the last 6 years, we have orchestrated anti-bullying weeks. We have orchestrated week-long LGBTQ awareness weeks, where we call them Embrace Our Diversity, right? Because it's our diversity, it's the school's diversity, the community's diversity. And I think some of the greatest things that I have noticed over the years, aside from student participation and teacher participation and the conversations that are being had in classrooms, I know one year we were setting up these beautiful bulletin boards in one of the main hallways, right? That had, information about LGBTQ history, had information about, Trans Remembrance Day, right? With images and stories of people who have been brutalized and killed by violence, right? And through transphobia and homophobia. And then this amazing board that had, posters and pictures and stories written by students from our school. And that afternoon happened to also be a day where parents were coming in for, I think, working on like high school schedules. And every single parent that walked through the hallway stopped and looked at these bulletin boards and were in amazement and just could not believe that a school that they once went to is now embracing these ideas. And seeing, even seeing some families who were same-sex couples. I mean, the amount of joy that they were experiencing, like, I'm sending my student to a school that recognizes who we are and appreciates who we are. And so it grew from there. And like I said, there's so many teachers on our campus who embrace it. We have pride flags all over the campus. And teachers who are constantly asking, right? Like, how do I engage with my students on conversations about pronouns, right? Or I have a student who has come out to me, can you give me more information of what I can do to better assist them, to support them? And especially during our Pride Week, a lot of teachers try to include a lot more LGBTQ stories, right, in their curriculum. And I think that's super important, because we often forget that queer people's identities are taken out of history, taken out of literature, right? As if it's a new phenomenon that gay people have just come into existence, right? And we haven't been here for thousands of years. And so I think it really gives students this realization that these identities have been here, right? They've been here, they're going to be here, and that they're part of this massive legacy of really empowered LGBTQ people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerry. And just as a point of praise here, as I facilitate professional learning all over the country and abroad, since I've become aware of Jerry's work with the middle school that he serves in, I've been sharing those examples to audiences all over the place, and they continue to be amazed and inspired by what can happen. So Joe, I'll ask you the same question, but I'll preface it by saying there are a lot of educators that feel that by simply placing their pronouns or saying, I'm going to post a pride flag, that's enough, without realizing that if we as educators are not actively dismantling the systems in education that oppress our queer youth, we are in fact the oppressor. So on that note, what are some of the things that you are doing to really cause desmadre in the name of equity and social justice? And as you know, Joe, desmadre means desmadre.
One of the things that I'm personally doing is just being alive, existing, and being myself every day in the classroom, along with all other LGBTQIA2S plus educators. And one of the biggest things that people don't realize about rainbow adults is that we've all experienced various levels of childhood trauma, which still affect us to who we are today in our everyday world. No matter how straight passing a person might be, we walk into spaces and ask ourselves, am I safe here? And that is something that we need to end for all rainbow children as they grow up to become adults. And one of the most basic ways that people can do this is to call on our allies who are not under our umbrella to simply answer kids' questions when they are asked as facts. We grew up in a society where, you know, something gay happened on TV and the channels were changed in public restaurants. We walked by and there was a feminine man and our parents would turn our heads. That's the society that we grew up. That takes a huge effect on your mental ability as you continue to grow up. So when a student comes up to you in the classroom and says, on the playground, they said, you're gay, that is a very interesting conversation to have. But to just say yes, or if they come up and said, that other teacher's gay, you can say, oh, let's make time to talk to them about it. Ask them, see if that's okay. But instead of saying what has always been the narrative of, oh, that's a conversation for at home, or that's something we don't talk about at school, or that's something that we'll say for when you're older. That is saying this is not appropriate right now, which is saying the existence of these people is not appropriate. That is what needs to be end. So when these questions are coming up, because kids are going to ask questions, we need to answer them. We need to answer them with confidence, and we need to allow all children to know that all children are beautiful, all children are accepted, and they will continue to be as they grow up into society. And by simply making those small changes into your everyday practice, that creates a better society for all people.
So Joe, I love what you just said, and it actually leads us right into the next question. So why don't you get us started with that one? Because you talk about the fact that queer teachers have this trauma that we bring into the classroom every single day. What are some of the experiences, if you feel comfortable in sharing? Because I think one of the things that I want to get out of this is that folks hear that shit happens to queer teachers every day, even now. And so what are some of the obstacles that you have encountered as you navigated your way in school districts? Because it's happening today.
You know, I would like everybody to know that I have the very obvious answers. I've had the school districts who have told me to tone it down and all that, but I'd like to share with you the things that you might not see of what happens to a queer educator. So one of the things that affects me to my core is when I first started my career, I would walk into all my fellow teachers' classrooms and they would have pictures of their husbands or their wives proudly on their desks with their families. And my picture of my partner was taped to the bottom of a dresser drawer so that when I opened it, I could in secret see his picture. That takes a toll on where you go every single day to know that you have to hide the most important part of yourself and not be able to talk to them about it. The way that I would navigate and skirt around conversations with my colleagues, we would always have this conversation where, it would come up, oh, do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a wife? It's like, I know you're asking me a question, but I don't know if I could trust you. That takes a toll on your ability to be able to do your job and do it well every single day. Even as far as living a completely different personal life when I leave the classroom and being one person. And for so long feeling like I had to come back into the classroom and code switch to be this completely different individual that's acceptable for children, that takes a toll on a person's life. So these little things that, the allies would never know about LGBT LGBTQIA2S teachers is that there is so much trauma that happens to us to date that you don't know and you won't understand, and we don't expect you to. But again, coming down to those small changes are going to change what we go through in our current day for the children of right now. So our goal is when they become adults, they will not have to go through these situations. They can openly display their families on their desk, no matter where it is they work. They can just in conversation burst out, listen to this great thing my husband did, and be proud of that and not have to double guess and think, is this an acceptable setting for me to share this intimate piece of my life? So by making those small changes, we are truly changing the future. And just think about it. There are 51 people in this room right now. If we share this information with one other person, we've just doubled that. You know, we can continue to press this message on others as we see need for change.
Ay, gracias. Joe, one of the things that you made me think of is that maybe allies, which of course, because they came here, if you were a cis hetero teacher, you're an ally because you chose to come and learn more, is that those of us that are queer, we have to come out every single day. Like we came out to our families, perhaps our friends, but we also have to come out every single day. Even if we're not straight passing. I'm not straight passing, but imagine if I showed up to facilitate PD, virtual or in person, and people are going to be like, ¿es o no es? ¿Es o no es? Is he not? And so I know that I have to come out, even if it's dangerous and scary, because if I don't, then we don't create a space where others will feel comfortable enough to do so as well. So thank you for taking us there, Joe.
When we talk about too, when we say, you know, we talk about our advocacy for LGBTQIA2S work, people often look at us and say, oh, he cares about that because he's gay. But when an ally talks about that, it makes another ally question, why do they care about this so deeply? And what do they know? So I'm not saying the work that the panel here today is doing is not important. However, the A is one of the most important pieces of this rainbow because they are the ones that the majority of people are actually going to listen to, because people think that we just do it for our own benefit. We're not. We're doing it for the benefit of all people. So A's, speak up. Please don't be shy. Don't be scared. We've been scared our whole life. If we can do it, you can do it.
Bombazos. Somebody put in the chat box. El Joe Dombrowski's throwing bombazos just like you. Mira. A ver, Laura, mira que sassy always. Laura, do you want to continue this conversation if you feel comfortable in sharing some of the things that you've had to overcome that perhaps our allies aren't aware of?
Well, I mean, I believe in transparency, right? So I'm going to go ahead and go with it. In 2007, you know, I get really emotional when I do share this part because I don't share this a lot as an educator. In 2007, my principal received an email from a parent that clearly stated, Coach Rizzo touched my daughter inappropriately. 2007. I think I was in my second year teaching, and still to this day, if you can see, I'm in my 15th year, and years later, I still get emotional when I share this. I had so much support from my principal that year that she went above and beyond for me. The athletic director went above and beyond for me because they knew me, for the work that I did. They valued me for the work that I did, not who I loved or what I loved, but who I was deep down inside. So much support that in the end, I had to wait a week, just waiting in scared, you know, what's gonna happen to me. I don't understand why they're doing this. I don't know why they're accusing me of something like this. This is terrible. One of the worst experiences in my educational career. Long story short, a week went by when we finally met, and the father was talking in that email about a moment where I'm a very passionate coach. And when you hear me speak or when you see me coach, you'll see that I'm everywhere. I'm in the girl's face. You're going to do this. You got this. Get your head in the game is what I did on her forehead. And that's what the father was talking about. So for a week, he made us think that he was talking about something else. And in that same conference, he wanted my teaching certificate to be revoked because I was gay. So that is one of the worst experiences that I've ever had to face. And in 2014, while I was supposed to be spending the last day of school with my 8th grade students who I loved and adored, I was actually called to central office because they received another email about an inappropriate relationship with a student. And I guess for me, you all that are gentlemen, it's not so obvious, but for me, it's very obvious, and back then I wasn't even covered in tattoos. But for me, it's very obvious that I'm a gay educator. And so I've been attacked. But I've known who I was. I've known what I'm valued. I show my value in everything that I do. And the love that I have for education and the love that I have for kids. So I've always had that support from the top to say, no, this isn't this. They've supported me. And so those are two of the worst experiences that I've ever had to face as an educator. I feel if I can't be transparent about that, I mean, who am I really, talking about transparency? And those are two of the, I hesitated for a little bit sharing that, but it was, they were really bad experiences to have to go through, but it taught me a lot about, I'm not going to change who I am. I'm not. And I'm going to continue doing what I do with kids and never change my philosophy. I never looked back, but I did learn from it, to always continue to be transparent and continue to, above anything, if you all, follow me on social media, you're going to see that I am a woman of God. And I believe he loves us all, no matter what, gender or what we like, what we don't like. And one of the other experiences that I had that I wanted to share with you is and I hope it will, plant a seed in your heart. A trans boy came up to me at church when I was serving, and he came up to me and he says, am I okay being here? Does God love me? And in that specific moment on the screen, the words, God is madly in love with you, came out. So all I needed to do was point to that screen. And I hesitate a lot to share, number one, that I'm a woman of faith, a woman of God. And number two, that experience, because you don't know how people are going to react to that. You really don't. And, I'm sure you've seen it, Dr. Medina, in all of your presentations. But to me, I'm as transparent as they come. And I'm willing to share that so that people know, that we've had it, we've had it rough, just like Joe said, it takes a mental toll on you. It really does. So if you are an ally, we thank you for the work that you do, but, keep those experiences in mind, that nobody should ever have to face, being threatened in what they love to do just because of who we love.
Laura, first of all, I mean, I don't even have words. Just thank you for being so fully you. And I hope that the folks in this space understand that what you just described isn't an isolated incident or incidents. Like, it happens to queer teachers every single day. As principals, we have those families that come in and ask students to be withdrawn from those classrooms. So I'll pass it over to David, and then we'll go to Jerry. Anything that you'd like to add, David, in terms of some of these things that perhaps folks don't even realize some of us have to go through as queer educators?
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. I think I echo what I see in the chat for your courage in sharing that. And it is, for me, it's trauma that's stored that I've had to spend extensive time in therapy for. I think, the emotional and mental well-being of us as queer educators is so critical, and we don't talk about it enough, because if you don't talk about it, you store it, you hold on to it. And I had the experience of being out. I came out to myself my senior year in high school. Then I went to undergrad, and I just said, I won't be in the closet anymore. And so I spent 4 fabulous years at my alma mater getting to be myself for my identity. And I didn't come out to my parents until a month before I graduated, because I wasn't sure if I would be safe. Not because my parents didn't love me, but because I know what comes culturally with, being accepted, and the religious aspects, and being the oldest male, all the things that come with it. And so it was really my own personal story involves me going back in the closet when I came to Texas, which was an incredibly difficult experience. I'm much better about talking about it now than I was then. And it's one of the hardest things that I've had to admit, is that part of why I left teaching was because I was tired of being back in the closet. Now I'm the principal, and now I get to create and dismantle, lots of things all together. But that was not who I was and where I was when I first came to Texas, because I was afraid of not being able to do my work simply because I dreaded the thought of being called into the principal's office. But I also dreaded the day-to-day heteronormativity that I experienced. Oh, quiero que conozcas a mi prima. Tengo mi hija. I want to introduce you to my daughter. And constantly having to say, oh, I'm busy lesson planning. And it was a joke then, but it isn't a joke. We do experience those types of things that are more heteronormative than we should. But I ultimately chose myself over, the work that I did. And that was really heartbreaking for me. Now I got to come back to it. And it was because of the encouragement of my husband, who said, David, there needs to be principals like you. People need to see people like you in these spaces leading. And I'm really grateful to be in a school district, and I put it in the chat, that expanded its non-discrimination policy, because policy matters, words matter. And us being able to accept ourselves fully in these spaces comes from all these different things that factor into how we show up in this work. One of the other stories, so I had let me introduce you to my niece. I have, you're so young, you're so great. Why don't let me set you up with somebody? And then fast forward to my first possibility of becoming an assistant principal. I sat down becoming an assistant principal. I sat down with the principal, talked to him a little bit about the position. And I said, well, I need you to know two things. This was a more affluent, more conservative school district that I knew I was going to potentially face some challenges with. And I said to him, Dr. Jones, I need you to know two things. Number one is I'm gay. I'm never going to hide that. I'm not going to be running around with the gay flag necessarily, but if anybody asks, I'm going to share it full-heartedly, who I am and who I love. And secondly, I want you to know that one day I'm going to go back to my district, and I'm glad that I got a chance to come back to SAISD, because I wanted to keep doing the work in this district. We're in the urban core. Like Jerry knows, we serve some of the most, historically ignored communities by intention. It's by design. All these things intersect with one another. And I grew up in a community similar to this, where I didn't know my place. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know the word gay. You'd hear the words maricón. You'd hear lots of other things that you hear in our culture, in our language. And we had to create a different space. So now that I'm here as principal, we did some programming with drag kings that read aloud to our kids. And I did get some pushback from a parent that reached out to me and emailed and said, I'm not sure our kids should be saying this. So I picked up the phone and I called him. We had a whole conversation about the 3 pillars of dual language and why social cultural competence matters. And that's part of who we are as a school, and that we can't ignore that our kids exist every day. But the last thing I wanted to share is that I also had to dismantle some things within myself. And I know the previous question was, what would we say to people who are afraid? But I'm saying this also to people like us, which is sometimes we're reinforcing patterns. Sometimes we're doing things that are actually oppressive, even though we're a part of the community. I remembered as a teacher having boys and girls passes. Stop with the boys and girls passes. We've got to stop. And I'm not trans, but now I think about what messed up things that I do as an educator. Boys and girls, let's line up. Let me randomize let me pick a boy. Stop. I can't say that enough. You've got to do some work. We all collectively have to do some work in making sure that we are not constructing or reinforcing spaces that are continuously oppressive. Whether you're the part of the allied community, or the LGBTQ+, we have work to do. And it's small things like boys and girls passes and saying, ladies and gentlemen, little things like that. We have to be careful about our language. The last thing I'll say is about the Happy Pride marquee. Small step. I did it last year. It was, pandemic time. So I kind of thought, I have a little bit of cover. Maybe people will be paying too much attention. And secretly, yes, I was a little nervous about, even as an openly gay principal. And I've had families that have said, estaban hablando de usted porque es gay. And I'm like, sí, they're like, pero no nos importa porque está haciendo un buen trabajo. And I'm like, thank you, I appreciate that. And families now ask about Jonathan. And it's amazing to think about where I was at that school back in 2010 and where I'm at now. But going back to the Happy Pride, I put up the Happy Pride, and this is the first year that our school went into Pride, right? So I thought, híjole, this is kind of bold, a ver qué pasa. And we put it up, and I had a dad that I saw in the morning. He was crossing the street, and he said, hey, who put up the Happy Pride sign? Because, you know, we were in school, and he saw it, and I said, I asked the custodian if he would do that. And he said, oh, that's awesome. He said, you know, my mom came by, which is the grandma, the abuelita of a little kid, and she was horrified. She said, you know, it was a whole conversation at their house. Why would they allow that? It's a public school. We shouldn't be teaching kids those things. And it actually opened up the conversation for this dad to have with his own mother about the fact that I'm gay. He's like, Mom, do you know the principal's gay? Do you know? And she's like, oh, de veras? And it completely changed the dynamic of that conversation just by knowing me. Like Laura said, knowing my intentions, knowing my corazón, knowing who I am. And so I think about saving one person's life. Like Laura said, if we can save one person's life by having this conversation, but if we can also open up one conversation at a home that may not have happened otherwise, that's why we're in this space. That's why we're here to cause some desmadre.
I love it. Hey, David, you mentioned some of those things like boys and girls. I know that there are some questions in the chat in terms of Spanish pronouns. There are tons of articles. The Woke Spanish Teacher on Instagram is doing a lot of work in this area, but it's ella and le maestre. And so there's actually now a lot that we can do in terms of how binary Spanish is. All of us are working on it. I don't know if you noticed, but I keep saying bienvenidos, bienvenidas, bienvenides, or todes instead of todos and todas. And so for those of you that facilitate instruction in Spanish, there are now resources. I have a colleague in Beijing that has been doing some of that similar work with Mandarin. And I know that there's another colleague of mine that's doing that work in French. So please make sure that you do some of that work, because the work is out there. Also, about 2 weeks ago, I did a live webinar because some of you are asking in terms of resources. 2 weeks ago, I did a live webinar with two queer children, a 16-year-old that is non-binary. And so they were able to share some of those resources. Also a 12-year-old young lady that identifies as a lesbian. And so she too shared some of those resources. We had their parents who are also teachers. So if you go back to the YouTube channel, /Dr. Jose Medina, you can catch that video, and there are actually slides with resources in English and in Spanish in terms of read alouds. It's almost time for us to go. I want to go to Jerry. Jerry, our last question is any message that you would like to share with either queer teachers in the space or queer students that will see this video on YouTube, and also give you a chance if there's anything else that you'd like to add in terms of some of the obstacles. We have about 7 minutes left. So if you would get us kind of wrapped up, that would be awesome. And we'll pass it over to the other colegas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest message here is just be visible, right? And be unapologetically you. I think it's important for us to kind of take up space where we are as educators, as students. I think we often, question, am I doing something? Is it too much, right, of something? And this is a conversation that I've had for many years, right? A lot of things that I try to push in my first few years were definitely had these instances of kind of pushback, right? Of like whether or not it was going too far. I remember the first time we wanted to do one of the awareness weeks, there was a parent who had spoken out about it. And the parent just said, oh, I just wish I had, had known about this beforehand so I could have spoken to my daughter about this. And one of my assistant principals at the time had brought up, well, maybe we should be sending out some type of like permission slip before this week happens. And I told her, no. And I said, because then you're saying that there's something inherently wrong with what we're doing. And I said, what if I told you, what if a parent, when we're celebrating, for example, like Black History Month, when we're celebrating a Hispanic Heritage Month, right? Why aren't we sending out, permission slips for that, right? And I tried to get her to understand that you are singling out this one event because you personally think there is something wrong with it. And I think another thing, especially for us as queer educators, we have to kind of put our own selves as almost kind of a barrier in protecting other queer students. And I think that is something that I've done for years. I know a lot of the kids who come, to the like our after school kind of safe space and stuff have always told me, right, my parents cannot know that I'm here for this, right? And so we've turned it into an art club, or we've turned it into something else, right? So that they know. And I think it's appropriate. It's important for us to know that as educators, we kind of have to create those barriers. And even with other teachers, right? When they've asked, oh, well, who's part of the Alliance? Oh, just groups of students, right? Because you don't want to be in that position where you out a student, because I mean, quite frankly, if a student hasn't come to you and expressed these ideas and their identities, then it's not really your business, right? Especially if you have some ulterior motive for why you want to do it. And I think a few years ago, there was this policy that Texas was trying to pass, where teachers would have to out their students to the parents if they knew about it. And I think that year I told my students, if this law were to pass, they can take my license, because I am not going to do that. I am not going to out kids and potentially put you in danger and in harm, just because people have issues with your identity. And so I think that's what's super important for us as queer educators, to be willing to continue to fight. And as queer students, same thing, like be willing to take up space in your classrooms, be willing to demand, why are we not talking about this in our curriculum, right? Why are people who identify as me not there, right? This is super important for us in order to continue to progress through this movement.
Gracias. Claro. Laura, final statement to queer educators, queer youth, or allies?
To everybody, really. I came out at the age of 16. Y a los 16, I had so much love from the world. I had love from my familia, my jefita, my carnal, my carnala. They loved me beyond belief. But because I didn't know if I was going to be accepted, because conversations like these didn't happen in my classroom, I lacked self-love. So if you can start with anything, educators, start with love, self-love, no matter what, and teach them that the world is not going to be nice to them, and that they may be faced with those pushbacks, and that they may be faced with that discrimination, and that there is still discrimination. But the more you teach them that self-love, you're going to see that they're going to turn into people like Dr. Medina, who's not afraid to stand in front of a group of educators and tell them, my husband, or like Joe and tell them, my husband, or like me and say, yes, my girlfriend and I went here or there. And they're going to develop that self-love. So that's really where you start, educators, because if conversations like these are not happening, then you do your part in the classroom to teach them that self-love, that no matter what, if they have that, they're going to be strong, in anything that they do. And people like David Nungaray, we're going to have 10 more principals just like him that are not afraid to stand in front of their parents and say, I am the principal and I am gay. Is there a problem with that? Because it shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't be afraid to speak of who we are. But I think that's what did it for me. The self-love. I had all the love in the world, pero no me quería a mí misma. Y ahí empezó. So teach them that no matter what, they're going to face the discrimination. But no matter what, if they have that love within themselves, they're going to be one like us, right here in the screen, that's not afraid to share who we are.
Ay, gracias, Laura, por estar con nosotros también. Con nosotres. Did you see? I caught myself. The Spanish binary. You want to go, David? Go ahead.
Can I piggyback off that a little bit? The question struck me when I read it, because you said this is a question that I was thinking, like, God, what would I say to others? But I thought, what would I say to myself back in 2010? That's where I went. And recently, I finished reading, and I brought it with me, the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And I don't work for her. I'm not like getting us some commission. This is just a darn good book. And Glennon's story is incredible. But I then listened to her talk again with Brene Brown, and she said, be who you are and let the world catch up. And I wish that somebody would have told me that when I first started in education. Be who you are and let the world catch up. Like Jerry said, we have to take up space. We have to be visible. We have to be transparent. It's been echoed across every single person that's spoken today. You see it even in the chat, that just us being resilient and being who we are doesn't mean that it doesn't come with pain and suffering. That's why I love her book, is help me make sense of some of my pain and some of my suffering through the process. And then for allies, you know, what I would say is, si no sabes, pregunta. Like, you don't know, just ask. And go research it. Like Dr. Medina said, there's a ton of articles out there. There's a ton of people that have written blogs, lots of tips. Just Google. If you don't know, ask. But don't not do anything, because being neutral does not serve anybody well. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve kids. It doesn't serve anybody well. And then I would say, take the bold move. Get out there and do something. You may get up there and you might say, hey, I listened to this talk and they talked about us not having boys and girls passes, and here's why. Get up there and say it, because if you don't say it, who else is going to say it? And I just think we have to be bold and unapologetic in that regard too. You may not get it all right. You may make mistakes. You may hurt people unintentionally along the way. Pero si no los haces, the kids are watching. They are watching. And it's important that we make sure that they watch and that they learn from what we do and how we lead with grace and learn with, you know, humility. Siempre estamos aprendiendo. We're always learning.
I'm so in love with the four panelists, not in a weird way. My husband knows, but I'm in love with all of you. Joe Dombrowski, finish us off, not in a weird way. What are you thinking? What are you thinking in terms of what would you say?
The biggest bit of advice is you can never live in somebody else's shoes, but it never hurts to take time to reflect on what that could possibly be like. And just know, again, that we as Rainbow people have gone through so much that is unseen and so much trauma that is unheard and unspoken of. So by simply knowing that we have been afraid our entire lives, and although even the five of us here, although that we might be speaking openly and afraid right now, still in our adult human lives, we encounter these moments where we are actually fearful for our lives because who we are as people. So if we're experiencing that fear, when you feel afraid to speak up about these things, please stop and reflect what that fear might be like for somebody else, and know that by you speaking up when you are afraid, it is making our lives much better and making the lives better for generations and generations of children to come. So if we can do it, you can do it. And we encourage you to please not be silent.
Thank you to the four of you. I wanted to just say one last thing. First of all, I do adore the four of you. Thank you for doing this. At the age of 5, I knew that I wasn't what my father wanted in a firstborn son. And he's an amazing father and now loves Tony more than he loves me, which is fine. But I knew at a young age that whatever I wasn't what was wanted or needed. I hope that what you take away along with all of these great messages is that no child should have to wait a lifetime to begin to love themselves. And that's where the educator falls into place. No child deserves to wait a lifetime to love themselves. That's really what it's about. So thank you so much for sharing this space with us. I am super excited that we had this moment. Gracias a todes, a todes. I will go ahead and hit the stop recording button, and I will put it on YouTube so that we can all share it and make sure that other educators and other families get a chance to hear the awesome message from our 4 panelists. Gracias, gracias Laura, gracias Jerry, gracias Joe, gracias David. I adore you all. Y have a good weekend, everybody. Un abrazote. Se portan bien, but not too well. Go cause good trouble in the name of equity and social justice. Adios. Ay nos vidrios.
Adios. Nos vemos.
Bye, everybody.
Gracias. Se portan bien, pero sigan causando desmadre.